Hey guys, it's Real Low Bermuda bringing you another lawn care video. Today I'm going to give you my top 10 spring lawn care tips. You're not going to want to miss this. Let's roll that intro. Tip number one, when the temperatures for the spring become fairly consistent and you know that you're not going to have a freeze, or at least you're fairly sure that you're not going to have any big freezes coming up for the rest of the spring, first thing you want to do is you want to scalp your lawn. Priority number one is get that lawn as low as your mower will allow you to mow, and the benefits you'll reap the benefits basically the entire rest of your spring. Tip number two, once you've got your lawn scalped down nice and low as your mower will let you mow, you're going to have a lot of thatch. And basically thatch is a buildup of leftover grass clippings from the previous year and just basically a root zone that's almost above ground that causes, almost like a layer that prevents water and nutrients from getting down into your soil, and it just looks really ugly. If you take a rake or even your fingers and you kind of go through there and you're kicking up a bunch of old dead grass blades, that's what you want to get rid of. And so you have two options really. You can rent a dethatcher, right? Those are called lots of different things, but basically it's a powered lawn rake is what it is. And sometimes it'll be small, thin tines that are basically raking up all that thatch. Sometimes you could use what you call a verticutter, which actually slices through the stolons and some of the soil, but ultimately still it accomplishes dethatching, but it also does some extra things as well. But at minimum, you just take a good old-fashioned rake and you get out there and you just start raking it up into piles and removing all of that excess thatch. You're just opening up that soil to receive sunlight, and that's really the key in the spring for an early green up. That's why you mow low, you scalp it down low, and then you dethatch it, and now that soil is just ready to receive that warmth and that sunlight and any nutrients that you apply on it, which we'll talk about in the future. But even if you only do steps 1 and steps 2, you scalp your lawn, then you dethatch it each spring, you're going to set yourself up for a great green lawn in the early spring, earlier than anybody else on your block. And definitely you'll have a healthy lawn all summer long. Tip number 3, throw down a Preemergent. So after you've scalped and you've dethatched, you've also opened up yourself to spring weeds. And the best way to control weeds is to prevent them from ever germinating in the first place. And that's when you use a Preemergent. All right, this is what I recommend, probably the best thing on the market. Hopefully you can get a good look at that. But ultimately, throwing down a Preemergent every spring, and I think they say, once the soil is about 55 degrees is when you can go ahead and throw that down. Even if your current soil temperatures are higher than 55 degrees, throw it down, right? You may not get 100% effectiveness, but you never really get 100% effectiveness. And so don't worry about the temperatures being too warm. Get it down. The sooner you get it down, the more weeds you're going to prevent, and you're going to throw that down again in the fall, right? But this is a spring lawn tip video, so we're going to focus on that. So if you have problems with weeds, which most people do, It's not a matter of post-growth herbicide, right? You have a weed, you're trying to figure out, how do I kill this weed? That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to have a healthy lawn. The way to have a healthy lawn is don't ever let those weeds grow in the first place. So you put that layer of pre-emergent down, and what that will do is when those seeds try to germinate, they'll be unsuccessful at doing so, and you won't have weed growth in the first place. Tip number 4. Once your grass is mostly greened up, you've already scalped, you've dethatched, you've put your pre-emergent down, and now you're waiting, right? You're waiting for the grass to start to green up, and if you've done those first 2 steps, you're gonna be way ahead of the game. So now you're starting to see a mostly green yard, and once it's mostly greened up, that's when you're gonna go ahead and feed it for the first time this spring. If you throw down any type of fertilizer before that grass is greened up, you're just pretty much spinning your wheels, right? But once that grass is greening up, it needs some food, it's getting hungry. And so what I recommend that you do is put 1 pound of nitrogen down per 1,000 feet of lawn. And if that doesn't make sense to you about how do I put down 1 pound of nitrogen, look at another video that I put down as far as the basics of lawn fertilizer, and I go into great detail on how to calculate your amount of nitrogen based on the fertilizer that you might have sitting in your garage right now, or maybe you're going to go buy some fertilizer and throw that down. But ultimately, 1 pound of nitrogen at this point in the spring, right when it's greening up, and you're going to give that a great boost, and you'll see even quicker results. And so that's kind of the name of the game, right? You're trying to get a great lawn quicker than anybody else in your neighborhood. You're anxious to get out there and just enjoy that beautiful lawn. And so that's some of the 3 most important steps: scalp, dethatch, 1 pound of in. All right, now we're moving on to tip number 5. All right, tip number 5, you want to throw down a liquid aerator, right? You want to take that compressed soil from all of last year's activities, the heat that kind of bakes it all summer long, you're mowing it, you're stepping on it, you're having family get-togethers, right? That soil gets compacted. That's why you want to take a aerator, and a lot of people will use an actual manual machine that actually takes plugs out of the ground. In my opinion, nowadays these chemicals are so effective that you really don't need to rent or have someone come out and aerate your lawn for you. And so what I use is the Aerator by n-ext. Just about all the products I'm using now are by the n-ext line. Definitely not sponsored by these guys, but hey, if you guys are interested in sponsoring me, I love your product. But no, I get no financial benefit from recommending this. The stuff just works. It works really well. And what happens is that soil starts to break apart and loosen up. And what that does is that allows water to get down into the soil, into the root zone. It allows your nutrients that you feed it to get down into the root zone. And so instead of a hard compacted soil, now you have a much more porous soil. And then also something that this has in it is humic 12. And that leads me to tip number 6, which is apply micronutrients to your lawn. So your macronutrients, and again, I made a video on this already, but just a refresher, your macronutrients are your NPK. That's why everything that you put on your lawn has these 3 numbers. This one is 005, right? You'll always have 3 numbers. Well, the first number is your N, that's your nitrogen. Your second number is your P, that's your potassium, or your phosphorus, I'm sorry, and your K is your potassium. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, right? Those are your macronutrients. Those are the things that your body, just like your body has to have to survive, that's what your lawn needs to have to survive. But then you also have your micronutrients, right? So this would be like you're taking a multivitamin, or you're trying to get all of your minerals and your electrolytes in your body. The lawn needs all those micronutrients as well. And something else that's really great about the n-ext line of products is everything they put out has humic acid in there. And what humic acid is, it's basically, it allows the lawn to accept those macronutrients in a much more efficient way. And so ultimately, the humic acid just allows the lawn to absorb and utilize other nutrients. And so that's really important. And so the other micronutrients that you can use, also provided by the n-ext line, would be like your microgreen, your root growth stimulator, your iron, all those things that you can get through different liquid applications, but you can also get them through granular applications. If you're not into spraying yet, and you just have a push spreader, that's no problem. You can get all these things now, like Carbon X. Carbon X is a great option for throwing stuff down with a spreader. So now we've gone through our top 6 tips for your spring care, and let's go into tip number 7. All right, tip number 7. Tip number 7 is mow frequently. Mow frequently. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to mow low. I'm a big believer in mowing low, but I also have Bermuda, right? But Bermuda thrives the lower you cut it. And most recommendations, 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches, right? So everyone agrees, but people do have success with higher lawns. They let it grow up to 2-3 inches even, and it can still thrive, right? So we're not going to talk about the height of mowing. I've done a lot of videos on the importance of mowing low. But one thing is undisputed, and that is you got to mow frequently. And the easiest thing to remember is the rule of 1/3. So you want to make sure that you never cut off more than 1/3 of your blade at a time. Anytime that you try to cut off, like let's say your grass is 3 inches and you want to cut it at 1 inch or you let it grow up. Let me start over. Your grass, you keep it at 2 inches, but you let it grow up over a week. You mow it once a week, it grows up to 4 inches. So now you have your mower set at 2 inches. That's your perfect height. You love it there. And you come back and you're cutting half of that blade off. What that will do, Bermuda, and I showed you this in another video, Bermuda only the top portion of the grass blade is green. The rest of the stalk is brown. And so if you cut more than 1/3 off, you're going to get down close to scalping the lawn again, and you're going to have brown blades exposed. And so if you've ever noticed in your yard, like every time you mow, sometimes it looks brown, that's probably because you're cutting off too much of that blade, right? So what you have to do is typically mow twice a week at minimum, right? Sometimes people will go 2 weeks. They'll mow their lawn every 2 weeks. So instead of cutting at 4 inches, it grew up to like 6 inches, right? Or like in my situation, I keep my grass at 6/10 of an inch. Well, 1/3 of that is 2/10 of an inch, right? 2/10, so that's about that much, right? When my grass blade grows that much, I've got to get out there and cut it. If I don't, it still looks nice, right? If it's 6/10 of an inch, I could let it grow a whole inch, and that would still be 1.5 inches, 1 inch and 6/10, right? It would look fine. But then when I go back to cut it, and I cut it back down to 6/10 of an inch, now I've stressed out the lawn, I've scalped it again, I've exposed a lot of brown, and I probably bogged up my mower, I've left a bunch of thatch on the lawn. It just creates nothing but problems, right? So the more frequently you cut it, the healthier that lawn is going to be. And so sometimes, typically, a typical week, I will mow mine every other day. So basically 3 times a week. And that's extreme, but also I'm mowing it at 6/10 of an inch. If you're mowing yours at 1.5 inches or 2 inches, you can get away with 2 cuts a week. Sometimes if the grass isn't growing very fast, you can maybe get away with 1 cut a week. But by no means anything longer than a week. It's just not possible if you want to have a healthy lawn. So remember, these are my top 10 tips to have the greatest lawn in your neighborhood this spring, right? It's not necessarily that you have to do it, but if you want a great lawn, this is what you got to do. All right, we're on tip number 8, and that is watering, right? How much do you water? Well, you need to water your lawn about 1 inch a week. And I recommend that you do it 1/2 inch 2 times a week. And even during that 1/2 inch watering twice a week, break that up into mini waterings. And so, in other words, if you try to put down 1 inch of water on your lawn in one watering, you're going to have a ton of runoff. Runoff creates a lot of problems. You're washing away nutrients, you're creating potential ruts, and you're just being wasteful, right? Even if you try to put down 1/2 inch twice a week, 1/2 inch at a time is very, very difficult to do. And so what I would recommend that you do is during your twice a week watering cycle is set it up with very short intervals of, let's say, if you're trying to put down 1/2 inch, maybe put that down in 3 different waterings. So like what I'll do is I'll start mine at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and 7 a.m. I'll have it run 3 different times to put down 1/2 inch. Well, how do I know how much is 1/2 inch? Well, there's lots of ways to do it. I actually bought these little guys on Amazon, and it came with a set of 12. And so I'm able to put these all over my lawn. And then I run my sprinkler system for, let's say, 10 minutes. And then I measure how much was in there after 10 minutes. And then I basically adjust my minutes based on that feedback I got. And sometimes I'll notice that, oh, this part of the lawn isn't quite getting as much water as that part of the lawn. And then I'll have to make adjustments as well. And so whether you have a sprinkler system or not, it doesn't matter, but you need to know like how much water is your sprinkler or your sprinkler system putting out. And that means if you have different sprinkler heads in different part of your yard, those heads are also going to put out different amounts of water per minute. And so it's really important to measure so you are putting down that 1 inch per week. Now, in Texas, in the middle of August, when it's 100 degrees every single day, sometimes, depending on the health of your lawn, you may go up to 1.5 inches per week. So that would mean like watering 1/2 inch 3 times a week if your watering restrictions allow that. But what I've found is if you have your lawn fed correctly, you give it all the right nutrients, you don't need to put anything more than 1 inch of water down a week, no matter how low you cut it. People always told me, if you mow low in the Texas heat and it's 110 degrees, it's going to bake your soil. Nonsense. All right, I have one of the healthiest lawns in the neighborhood and I'm mowing at 0.6 of an inch. That's how high my grass is, and my lawn is so thick and so healthy. All right, I'll show you videos this coming summer. If you follow and subscribe to my channel, you'll see the progress of how healthy my lawn is, and that's with watering 1 inch a week. All right, guys, tip number 9 is consider leveling out your lawn. If you are like most people, your lawn is bumpy and it's lumpy. It's got low spots. And when you're mowing, especially with a rotary mower that has 4 wheels, you're mowing along and a wheel dips down into one of those low spots, that leaves a scalp mark, right? And you don't want those all year long. And so it's a pretty simple process to fix that. And all you have to do is go down to your local landscape company and buy some masonry sand. And the reason why you do masonry sand instead of anything else like fancy top dressing and topsoil and compost and all those things is your goal with step 9 is to level your lawn, right? Your goal at this point in this step is not to give your lawn a bunch of nutrients and things like that. And you definitely don't want a bunch of, compostable mulch and granite and all sorts of things in there, right? You just want level. That's what we're talking about right now. And so the best thing to level your lawn is with sand. And if you haven't seen my video on how to level your lawn, I go through the whole process. right? But ultimately, we're not going to talk about that today. But seriously, guys, if you haven't leveled your lawn with sand, it is so super easy and it's so cheap, anybody can do it. And so if you want more information on that, go check out my other video that goes into some great detail on how to level your lawn. My last tip, number 10, is consider spoon feeding your lawn all the nutrients it needs throughout the next 9 months. Through spring, through summer, through fall. Consider spoon feeding. And what do I mean by that? Well, instead of going down and buying your big generic bag of fertilizer and throwing it down once this spring and then being done with it, it's not a great idea. And again, I've made a video specifically talking about addressing all the basics and the fundamentals of fertilizer. So I don't want to make this too lengthy and talk about, you know, what type of fertilizers and everything else. But what I do want you to consider, my tip number 10, is instead of just trying to get out there once every season, get in the habit of going out into your lawn every 2 weeks and giving it a little bit of food every 2 weeks. All right, get into that habit. I set mine up on the 1st and the 15th of every month. I'm out there giving it some food. And I'll also make observations of, do I think that it needs a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that, a little less of this? Maybe it's needing, I'm noticing some dry spots that might need some extra water, different things like that. But ultimately, when I talked about putting down a pound of nitrogen in the spring, you still want to do that. But that's only a one-time application. The rest of the time, basically most recommendations is to put down 1 pound of nitrogen each month. Well, what I recommend is do a half a pound twice a month. And also that gives you a chance to go in with your micronutrients every month. And you can even split that up into even little smaller doses and do that every 2 weeks as well. It gives you a chance to go in there and add some iron. If you notice that your lawn is a little bit, maybe yellow, or you're not just getting the green pop that you want, you go in there and give it a dose of iron every couple weeks. And so there's a lot of things that you can do with spoon feeding. And the greatest thing about it, well, not the greatest thing is you're going to have an amazing lawn. But the other great thing about it is you're not really going to hurt your lawn because you're putting such small doses at a time. You always hear about, ooh, be careful, you might burn your lawn with too much of this. Well, with spoon feeding those nutrients, you're putting down micro doses that your lawn can absorb and handle, and you don't risk burning your lawn. Whereas if you're throwing down something that's supposed to last for 3 months, good chance that could happen. You could burn your lawn by putting down a large amount that's supposed to just sit there in your soil for 3 months. Spoon feed. So there you have it, guys. That's my top 10 springtime lawn care tips. If you do even half of those tips, you're going to outperform all of your neighbors. But if you can incorporate all 10, in which everybody can, there's not a single thing that I talked about today that is complicated and that you need to hire someone to do. These are all things that you, the basic homeowner, can start today. You can go down to the hardware store today or get onto Amazon and start ordering some things today and start putting these things into practice. And if you do, you're going to be amazed at the results in just one season. Like, we're not talking about years from now. We're talking about by the end of spring this year, you're going to totally transform your lawn with these 10 tips. So this is Real Low Bermuda signing out.